Today's topic that I wanted to talk about was guilt. And it's kind of like the opposite of what we talked about last week, which is blame, where in blame, you're blaming the other person. In guilt, you are feeling that you are the one who needs to be blamed in some ways, right? And I thought, like, during current times of COVID, work has gone up for all of us, right? Like, it's either taking care of children if you have, or taking care of older family members, working in the front lines if you do that, or just general like work, housework. So this makes us feel overwhelmed pretty easily. And, we start feeling like we are not good enough. And then to that not good enough feeling, if you add the feeling of responsibility that you feel towards, your work, family, community, you start feeling guilty. So then that's why I thought maybe this topic is relevant for us to talk, now. And especially, for women, I feel the feeling of guilt is much higher because in at least most of the households, women are still the primary caretakers. So let's define what is guilt. Now, kind of the dictionary definition is, feeling responsible or regretful for doing something wrong, either real or imaginary, and either intentionally or accidentally. So one can also feel guilty for things we haven't done, but we think about, right? Having like, let's say evil thoughts for somebody, we start feeling guilty again. So real, imaginary, intentionally or accidentally, for doing something wrong, the regret that we feel, that is guilt. Now, I want to also quickly differentiate between guilt and shame, because guilt is when we feel sorry guilt is we feel when we do something wrong. Shame is the feeling that we feel that when we think we are wrong, right? So I have done something wrong versus I am wrong. And shame runs quite deep. It is related to your identity. And although they're very related, the shame and guilt, I'm not going to talk about shame, and I just want to focus on guilt for now. So let me just admit some more people. Okay. So now, guilt is about, like I said, when we do something wrong. So the question is, how do we define what is right and wrong? Or what is our quote unquote moral code? So our moral code is different between different people, right? Based on your culture, your family upbringing, your religious upbringing. For example, what values do you believe in? What were you taught? What do people around you consider moral? What have you chosen personally to believe in, etc. Obviously, some classic examples of different moral codes, is the classic debate in America that you guys probably all know, which is about abortion, right? It kind of falls in, it's right for some people, it's wrong for some people. Or things like, should we go to work as women or should we stay at home? Or just in general, how much money is it okay to spend on ourselves versus savings for future or family? Eating healthy, just list goes on, right? Like basically our moral code is completely different from one person to the other. For example, what I feel guilty for, let's say spending $100 on a nice piece of jewelry, I feel guilty for it, but maybe for one of you it's totally okay. Right? So what we feel guilty for differs from person to person. And the second part is, if I feel guilty for something, I expect you to feel guilty for the same thing. Because I conveniently forget that we are actually different people and our moral codes may be different. And this can obviously lead to tiffs, right? Or misunderstandings. I mean, simple example is, let's say my partner, he does not believe that making time for exercise is more important than eating dinner on time. Versus for me, I can eat later, but I want to exercise first. So what happens is, now when I exercise and it delays our dinner, he wants me to feel guilty as if I've done something wrong. But I don't feel guilty because in my moral code, it wasn't important. So again, this misunderstanding between what we consider right and wrong, and hence what you and I should feel guilty about, can also lead to tiffs in people. Also, the good news about guilt is following, is that no matter what our moral code is, feeling guilty is basically a reminder of having a moral compass. It is kind of like our moral compass, actually. So when you deviate from, your moral north star, let's say, or your moral north, guilt is that compass that generates that unpleasant feeling in the body that moves you to do something and correct you back to your moral north. A simple example is, like the other day I was feeling really lazy and I was binge watching Netflix, okay? And I know part of what is important for me as part of my home duty is to cook in the evening. So I started feeling guilty as time went by for watching Netflix. And the guilt was enough at one point that it actually moved me to stop Netflix and go and cook. Right? Guilt is like any other emotion, and every emotion basically it comes from the word mover, which means moves. So it moves you, and that's what it is for. That's where it serves us, which serves us to do something that is right by our, I guess, standards. So the analogy I kind of like is, guilt. I think of guilt as food, for moral self. So, as food is necessary for survival, right? We need guilt to kind of keep our morality alive. And that's how it's serving us. Now, here is the catch. Just like food, we can overeat. Similarly, we can overindulge ourselves in guilt just to soothe ourselves. And this is going to sound weird, like, oh, guilt is a bad thing, and we are overindulging kind of out of our own choice in it. So before I go into nuances of that, let me just give you an example, right? So think of a mom, like a mother you see, and her child is crying. So you go and tell the mother saying, hey, your child is crying. And if she like looks at you and kind of feels sorry and feels remorse, you start feeling sympathy for her. And you think her guilt indicates that she cares for her child and hence she's a good person. Now, what if when you told her, hey, your child is crying, and she showed no guilt and no remorse? Your instant reaction might be, oh, she doesn't care, she's not a good person. So kind of the equation is that, when we feel guilty or when we see other people feel guilty, we think it is an indicator to a person's morality and goodness. And here's the catch. We think of feeling guilty as a penance or self-punishment to absolve ourselves from what we did wrong. Right? So you feel guilty, it is a kind of a indicator that you're a good person, and it also in some way is your self-punishment to get over whatever you did wrong. And this is the what I call reward of guilt. Meaning if I feel guilty, it reminds me I'm a good person and it absolves me from what I have done wrong. And this reward of feeling good and absolving oneself is why we can overindulge. Because we want to keep reminding ourselves, oh, I'm a good person. If I just continue feeling guilty, I am a good person. If I continue feeling guilty, I'm just paying for what I have done wrong. And this is the cycle of over-guilt and overindulgence. Right? So I'm going to just quickly recap. Before I recap, one more thing I'll mention is this cycle begins, right? We start substituting action. So the original guilt's intent was to move you to amend, to make an amend to what was done wrong, and you go and correct it. However, the over guilt, it becomes a substitute for the action. Right? So instead of actually doing amends, what we do is we just sit there, we feel guilty, and that becomes our amend itself. And that's where it is counterproductive. So in my case, in the Netflix example, right? So I continue watching Netflix, not cook. And if I continue just feeling guilty about it, then I feel like, well, I'm feeling guilty, so it's okay, let me just continue watching Netflix. I'm just feeling guilty, and that just means I'm a good person and I still care for cooking. I don't have to get up and cook. I can just feel guilty about it. right? So that's kind of the substitution of over guilt, substituting to from and taking you away from the actual action that the original guilt was supposed to make you do. So to recap, right, guilt, like I said, is an indication of we did something wrong, and some guilt is necessary for all human beings. It moves you to make amends, to honor what is important to you, and hence it serves you. However, we can overindulge in guilt, and this is a soothing mechanism to reward ourselves, to feel like we are a good people, and to absolve us from what we did wrong. Now, the last thing or last intention is to make you feel guilty for feeling guilty, right? That's not the intent of saying, don't feel guilty and you should feel guilty if you feel guilty, and that's a cycle. The intention is actually the other way around. So let me just kind of go over a couple of things which are pretty simple that we can do when we get caught in this cycle. So number one, which is a standard thing, is reminders, right? Remembering the facts and just remembering what I just went over, what is the purpose of guilt, the fact that we can overindulge, and how we overindulge in it, just like we overeat food or overindulge in any other thing that we like. Number two, understanding. So let's say you're feeling guilty. Understanding what are you feeling guilty for clearly. Right? So when you feel guilty, just ask yourself, what is important to me that I am not honoring? And get very clear, okay, I'm feeling guilty because, let's say in my case, being fair, doing my fair part of home, like chores, is kind of my moral ethic. So when I'm shying away from it and watching Netflix, that is, I'm not honoring that value of mine. And that is triggering that guilt, and then I should just get up and do it. So what are you feeling guilty for? Be very clear. What is important to me that I'm not honoring and hence feeling guilty for? Right? Then number three, once you know whatever that thing is, you have a choice, right? Choose consciously from a place of empowerment, right? Your choices are, one, to either act or amend, right? To do something. Through actually, let's say in my case, I actually got up and cook. A special note here, right? If the amend is not possible, you don't want to kill yourself just kind of trying to achieve that thing that you had set out for, you can also reassess your goal, right? Hey, I'm too tired. Does cooking every day is important? Can I cook maybe twice a week, right? What was the goal that you set out for? And this is especially important if perfection runs, or if you're a perfectionist, right? Because as perfectionists, which a lot of us are, we set very high goals. And then we can feel guilty and then keep whipping ourselves to kind of act and act and act and tire ourselves, right? So either you act or you can reassess the goal. Either is an option. And the last one is, maybe you choose to let this one go and allow yourself to not course correct. Maybe this is a friendship that's not worth pursuing. You've hurt the person, but you don't want to continue this relationship. So instead of feeling guilty, you just let go of the relationship. Right? So, but again, it is an intentional, conscious, and empowered choice. Right? And that's one thing that nobody can ever take away from us, is our freedom to choose on how we kind of approach a situation, right? So that choice we always have. And now the fourth thing is, if you continue feeling guilty, right, even after that, ask yourself, is this guilt serving me or soothing me, right? If it serves me, how is it really serving me? And just remembering again that overindulgence is a soothing technique, right? So am I overindulging right now? What can I do? Again, going back, what are my choices? And making a conscious choice again. And then the last, but the most important thing, is to be kind to yourself, right? Again, what we don't want is to feel guilty for feeling guilty. It's like when we start feeling angry for feeling sad and feeling sad for feeling angry. We don't want that loop, right? So a common mistake or myth out there is, self-compassion or self-kindness is an overindulgence. It is not, right? Self-kindness is the root of every change, right? And what does kindness can look like in this situation, that maybe this is hard, and maybe you are aware you've made a mistake, but the course correction is actually a very hard action for you to take. Let's say to go and talk to that friend, or go and let's say I'm too tired to get up and clean and cook and whatever. So just being kind, saying, okay, this is hard, and that's okay. And from there, you can again either make a conscious choice, reassess the goal, or let go, but all intentionally, because it's the lack of intention that runs that, the subconscious cycle of guilt. So that's all I had prepared, right, in terms of what is guilt, how and why does it serve us, and how we can overindulge, and how it becomes a soothing technique, and then how we can break the cycle. So I'm going to